Hi there, it's Ian here, and you're watching Grumpy Opinions, the show where I'm going to tell you all about what I think of films, TV shows, games, and life in general. Let's get on with the show. Game of Thrones is Game of Thrones, and this is the penultimate episode, that means the second last. Anyway, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe to me here and follow me on Twitter at Grumpy Opinions. Episode 5, The Bells, starts with Varys writing some seditious messages and chatting to one of his little birds. And it seems that Dany isn't eating or speaking to anyone. She's all upset. And that's not really very good. So Jon finally gets a Dragonstone, and old Varys makes an appeal to him, to his common sense. But it's plain that Varys knows the truth about Jon's heritage, and he wants Jon on the throne. But Jon's really stubborn, and he loves Dany, sort of. And Tyrion's really stubborn too, so he goes and tells Dany that Varys knows. And wouldn't you know, she actually worked out already, and she isn't happy at all, not with anyone. And she's especially not happy with Tyrion, because, he could have spoken to her before he told Varys, and he didn't. But she's more cross with Varys, so he gets clapped in irons, and yeah, Dany burns him with a dragon. And the boys are a wee bit okay, that didn't go well. Except for Grey Worm, who's I hate everyone now. And he's still being a moody teenager later on when Johnny comes to see Dany. And he's we need to talk. I don't want to be king, you're my queen. And she's cool, give your queen some sugar. And he's yeah, no thanks, Aunt Dany. And she's well, fine then. So plans end up getting made, and Tyrion's still please don't burn the city, let the people surrender, they're innocent. So if the bells ring, let everybody go and stop fighting. And she's fine. Oh, by the way, we caught your brother coming into the city. So down at the camp somewhere, Tyrion has a mission for Davos, and he goes to free Jaime. Tells Jaime that there's a boat put aside for him, back on that wee cove below King's Landing. So get there and get Cersei out through the Dragonskull vaults and escape to Pentos, and you'll be free. You just never come back. And ironically, that's pretty much exactly what happened to Dany and Viserys during the last time there was a big siege. On the day anyway, the armies assemble, and Tyrion reminds Jon, if the bells ring, remember, it's the episode title, so stop fighting. And inside the castle, the Hound and Arya and Jaime, they've all snuck in and before the gate's shut. But Jaime gets caught by an inner gate closing, and he has to find himself a new route to the castle. And just then, Dany does an old aviation trick, and she flies in out the sun and takes out Euron's fleet of many ships with scorpions with absolutely no problem at all. And then she starts wasting all the fortifications along the walls, and somehow the people at the other end of the city don't hear any of this, so it ends up being a massive surprise when she takes out the front gate from behind. And the army's storming inside, and it's fighting, and everyone's dying, and she's burning stuff, and Cersei's still nah, this is fine. Aye, okay doll. And then Team Dragon finally gets to Team Lion proper, and Team Lion gives up. Okay, cool. And somebody says ring the bell, and eventually somebody does. Eventually, no, really, seriously, literally it takes 2 minutes of screen time before the bell rings. But anyway, so you're cool. So that's the end of it. So what's going to happen now? It's all going to be politics and stuff. No, it's not, because crazy Dany is cray-cray, and she starts by burning everybody, literally everybody. So understandably, the Lannister army's that what? And Grey Worm goes all batshit on them, and he doesn't look too happy when Jon tries to forestall all this death and mayhem. But meanwhile, Jaime made it to the cove, because he went the long way round, and he only bumps into Euron, who escaped from the ships, and he wants to have a fight because, fuck it, he's a pirate and he feels like doing that. So that kind of makes sense, I suppose. So they have a fight, and it goes really bad for both of them, but Jaime ends up limping off, the slightly less dead out of the two. And the Hound and Arya, they got into the centre of the palace, and he finally reasons with her that revenge is a terrible bad lot, and for once she actually listens, because reasons. And she thanks him, and she goes off away home, and he goes off to find the Zombie Mountain, and the Zombie Mountain wants to fight him as well, a lot. So they go at her pure hammer and tongs, smashing the hell out of each other while the building falls down around them. And Cersei runs away, and she gets found by Jaime, and Jaime leads her into the vaults. And Arya's run through the city, through burning, exploding streets, and the rest of the army's retreating out of the city because it's all gone to pot, and it's looking grim for everybody. And Clegane Bowl ends up finishing with the Hound literally buffaloing the mountain through a broken wall of the castle, and they fall to their deaths. And Jaime and Cersei, they end up finding the exit blocked from the vaults, and they can only hold on to each other and cuddle as the Red Keep collapses literally on top of them. And Arya, she gets caught in a wave of fire and dust and rubble. But she isn't dead. And she pulls herself to her feet. She looks out into the carnage.
Behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him.
So what did I think? Well, wow. I mean, this was clearly where the majority of this season's budget went. This was a massive, amazing episode. I mean, this was balls to walls, like total nightmare Warzone stuff. I mean, I saw like shades of literally every single like siege or city battle movie I've ever actually seen. I mean, there's little bits of like Kingdom of Heaven in there. There's stuff like Black Hawk Down. There's a Siege of Minas Tirith from Lord of the Rings. There's the end of Saving Private Ryan. I mean, it felt like it just referenced so many things and it tied it all into like a massive conflict and a mess of emotions. And it also pulled like zero punches. I mean, right from the minute the gates came down, I started to like feel a bit conflicted since I realized every time we saw like the Lannister army being decimated, it was being intercut with like terrified civilians running away and buildings falling down. And you realize that the good guys here, who you thought were the good guys, aren't really being very good. And there was so much effort to show like the faces of the enemy soldiers and how brutally they were being killed and like maimed that even before the bells rang, it was like, it really made you feel that way about it. And then suddenly there was that moment where we looked on Dany's face and you see that she isn't going to stop right there. And she absolutely needs to finish Cersei. And like for a moment, I thought she was just going to fly right up to the Red Keep and maybe land there or something, or maybe like Dracarys Cersei through the balcony window, or just take out the Red Keep. But no, she like lays waste to the whole city bit by bit, going up to it. Like she's doing it for the benefit of Cersei. She's doing it to like show Cersei what she can do. And I really like how it was done. I mean, it was really clever. I mean, there was lots of little things tied into that moment, like when Jon saw the soldier and he was going to rape the woman and he stops him and then he kills him because he isn't going to stop. And then he just freezes and he looks at what he's done because, in a way, I felt like that was a microcosm of what's happening in the city and what's happening with him and Dany. And it's exactly what's likely to happen when he confronts Dany next week. He's going to say, don't do this, and she's going to keep doing it. And he's probably going to have to kill her. And like the looks on his face and Tyrion's when they realised, like when she kept burning after the bells were ringing, that Varys was right and Varys died for nothing, and they were complicit in that. And like despite both having reservations about how Dany is as queen, and I have to go back to what I've said before. I think this isn't new. This has been set up for a long time. I mean, Dany's been getting set up basically since season one. She burned that witch on the funeral pyre and walked into it like at the end of season one, and after that, at the end of season two, she locked the King of Karth in like his own vault to die. I mean, yeah, they were bad people who done her wrong, but then she ended up killing all the slave dealers, and they were slave dealers, so it was fine. We didn't question it, but she killed lots and lots of people. And then she crucified the Masters, and sure, the Masters are nasty, and they had also crucified all these people as well. And then, she ended up burning all of the Dothraki cows because they basically, were going to cause her problems. Fed some folk to her dragons in season 5, and yeah, she basically then came across the Narrow Sea and demanded every single person before her bend to the knee. And but anyone who didn't and stood against her, well, they died. I mean, we've seen that. We saw what happened to like the Tarlys. And this isn't like her being nuts like her dad. And even her dad, like, he wasn't nuts all the time. He got nuts over a period of time. I mean, there's a bit of crazy in there, but it's more that having learned from birth that she deserves to be queen by destined right, because her brother told her that all the time, and about how her family was done really badly wrong by all these people who she never actually met until now. And the way to achieve it, as she has learned over and over again, is to be kind of ruthless and slaughter her enemies. And she's made missteps here and there, and she's done good things here and there, but until now she's kind of been balanced like out by wiser, cooler heads, and one by one, all those wiser, cooler heads have either gone away, they've died, they've been murdered, they got sent away, or they've betrayed her and she's had to kill them or send them off or something. And now she's angry, she's alone, she's in grief for like Jorah and for Missandei and for like, two of her dragons have now died. They're basically her babies. And she's now in a strange land for the people who basically refuse to bow to her, are terrified her, don't like her. And all the people there, they don't understand who she is as far as she's concerned. And she's accustomed to being like across the sea. People basically, they're calling her like mother, and they absolutely love her. But now everyone flocks to her enemies. And like even her own boyfriend, like her boyfriend won't even sleep with her now. And by rights, the same rights that she clings to as to why she has divine right to be on the Iron Throne, he actually has a better argument for being on the Iron Throne, because that's the way it works. And not only that, she can see that actually everybody likes him better too. So yeah, so on top of all that, she gets to that point and the bells ring. And it's not her victory. Because see, the bells ringing, that's Tyrion's victory. And Tyrion's betrayed her. And it's Jon's victory. And Jon's betrayed her. And everyone she's starting to distrust and dislike, the people who have let her down, they're the ones who are basically winning at this point in her mind. And her biggest enemy is right there, Cersei. The last woman standing, the one who's caused all these problems for her, the one who embodies everything. And the whole city embodies everything. It's the emblem of everything she hates and everything that was bad that was done against her and the Targaryens.
I wish I could put my fist through this whole lousy, beautiful town.
And as we know, Targaryens tend to go a wee bit nuts. They tend to be a bit all or nothing. So boom, she burns everything, just kind of like her old man wanted to do at the end. And I think it's important to lay that out. I've seen countless folks saying that, it was only just thrown in this season. She was never really like that before, but I don't think it was. I think it's been a little clumsily done because everything in the last couple of seasons has been clumsy. But I think it has been there. The groundwork for this has always been there. I mean, I've always thought that she was likely to turn into a bit of a tyrant. And moving on from Dany, let's talk about like Tyrion and Jaime. I mean, there was that wee scene that was so lovely with them. The little beautiful scene for those actors. It was a good chance to see them, bouncing off each other. We don't see that much these days. And it was a reminder of why we love them both. And it was a great wee callback to like Jaime being tied up in a tent somewhere and how he spent most of like season 2 and chunks of season 3. And also like, to Tyrion when he was a prisoner. I just really liked that scene. It was great. And like, Jaime and Cersei's final reunion, that was kind of sweet in a weird way. And it reminds you that despite Cersei being like a horrid monster, she's still a human being. I mean, she's a basket case of emotions and hateful nonsense, so we don't have to like her. But at the end, we're reminded that, Lena Headey has really always humanized the character really well, has actually portrayed her as a person who's nuts and evil, but a person nonetheless. And I kind of loved how they tied it into the prophecy, like that Maggie the Frog told Cersei, and about how she'd only have 3 kids, and her little brother would end up killing her, like with his hands around her throat. And that's basically what happened, because she was pregnant with her 4th child, and Jaime has her arms around her, and then they're both crushed and suffocated by the debris of the entire castle falling on them. And I thought that was a fitting ending for them, together, the pair of them, the twins. They'd been born together and they died together. And I thought in many ways, it was disappointingly real in the best Game of Thrones fashion. That way of, don't use the lift or go into the basement of a burning building because you'll probably get killed, and it pays off in exactly realistic fashion. And another thing I really liked was Clegane Bowl. I mean, yeah, everyone been building it up, and it wasn't the greatest fight I've ever seen, but it was satisfying, and I loved how they intercut it with like Arya running around, and I think we all knew how it was going to end, and that's okay, but I liked also that Sandor finally got Arya to listen to him, and he did he said to her the "look at me" line.
Look at me. Look at me.
And that's funny because I always remember that because it was in like on one of the things on the DVD. There was his original like audition tape, and he says the line,
"We're Gregor's last." Look at me! Look at me! That's pretty for you, isn't it?
I really liked that they brought that back. I mean, that kind of maybe that was a bit fan service, but it tickled me a wee bit, and I'm glad that she did. That she went away. She decided to forsake vengeance and go. But that kind of brings me into some of the less likey things. To start with, why does Arya suddenly listen? I mean, this is Arya. I mean, previous seasons, you'd have had 2 episodes of them travelling up and down the King's Road talking and getting into adventures and learning stuff. But, they've never really set up why she would change her mind now. I mean, Arya's never listened to anyone, basically. Virtually ever. She's learned things, but she just never actually agrees with what people say. But so we suddenly go from her never listening to people to her suddenly doing a big-eyed Disney face and like giving up on her vengeance quest, literally in the castle. I mean, this feels like they've shortcut that character arc completely. I mean, which is weird because they had her killing the Night's King the other week, and the fact that she's got this set up clearly that she's going to be really important next week as well. It just seems a little strange, like that suddenly she'd be like, right, okay, I'll just give that up. Considering also it's Arya, she should be in and out of the castle in 2 minutes, like just literally scale the castle wall and just stab Cersei and be gone, like wearing 3 different people's faces on the way. I mean, that she's that good, and instead they just went meh. And although I loved the final shot, when did Game of Thrones become the Arya Stark show? I mean, it's clear that Dan and Dan really like Maisie's work, and it's understandable. She's really good in it. And, they have a real soft spot for the character, and I think most people do. But at this point, I kind of want things to go a bit differently for her. Like I said last week, but a bit more on that later. And I'm not faulting any of the scenes that she was in. I'm not faulting Maisie Williams' performance. She's really, really good. But what I'm saying is, it was a little bit too much like the Battle of Winterfell, where it kept cutting away when it looked like she might die every 2 seconds to the point where you just stop worrying about her dying because you've just seen it too many times. So, like, it was at least 3 or 4 times. It was like, oh, she might die. Oh, she might die. So when the end actually came, I was like, yeah, she's not dead. In fact, when I saw the fire and all the rubble and everything flying past her, I kind of hoped she'd wake up with like burns on her face like the Hound, but nah, they didn't. So clearly they've got to keep the main actress looking pretty or something. But anyway, another thing though is, right, you saw the Hound, you saw Jaime Lannister, and you saw Arya literally just walk into this city, like with only a hood up. I mean, why didn't they just send loads of people into the city like that, like to get ready, like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves style, like taking of Troy? You send people in advance to open gates and capture strategic places. I mean, I know they were going to go in with dragons and the Unsullied and everything, but surely that would have also helped. And I mean, Varys would have been ideally suited to get his folk in, but but he's dead, and definitely feels like something Littlefinger would have done. Oh, but he's dead, and oh wait, these are all the most intelligent characters in the thing, and they're all dead now. But it feels like something that Tyrion would have suggested as well. But it feels like just nah, we'll just not bother with that. But it slightly made a mockery. I mean, that scene where Jaime just walks through the middle of like the Golden Company, I literally laughed out loud because I thought, what? But my point is, anyway, I mean, it seems ridiculous because what it hammered home to me was that if Arya had left Winterfell a couple of days before everyone else, then she'd have killed Cersei like by now, and she'd be halfway home. I mean, it's awfully convenient that they all arrive at exactly the same time on the day of the battle, especially since she left at the same time as Jon, and like the same episode as Jon, and then Jon's whole army was supposed to go, and yet he's trying to move an entire army of like Northmen and that down the King's Road, and she's like two people on horseback, and it took them the same amount of time. I mean, surely, like, because she had nothing else to do, she should have arrived way in advance. Because he had to arrive wherever it was, taking this army down. He had to go to Dragonstone and back. He had to presumably formulate battle plans and get everything in place, make sure everyone's armed and ready to go. That takes time. You can't do that overnight. And all she was doing was riding straight down the road going to the castle. I mean, this is the same thing that people have been saying about the teleporting issue that's been plaguing this show, like ever since it's gone off book. Like, as soon as I go away from the novel, this has been happening. I mean, think about it. If you actually go back and look at the bit, and I think it was season 3, where Jon takes the watch up to Crassus Keep to kill the deserters, like, that wasn't in the books, and they get there and back in the same episode, and then it's like, it's like it never happened, because, funnily enough, it isn't in the plot. They just added it in to have more fights and action sequences. And there's another thing, though. I mean, was I the only one who didn't like that ring the bell scene? Now, apart from like Tyrion going on and on and on about ring the bell, ring the bell, ring the bell through the first like half hour of the episode, it finally got to that moment. The armies are like facing off, and as I said, I mean, they sit there. The guy throws down the sword, but then there's literally like 2 minutes between the first time you hear somebody in the background shout "ring the bells," and you keep hearing people going "ring the bells, someone ring the bells," and then finally somebody actually does. But it literally is about 2 minutes of screen time. That's way too long. And it felt really, really boring. It felt really kind of like dull. I was getting annoyed watching it. And similarly, like just in terms of things that seemed daft to me, the whole dragon versus the ballistas thing. They called them scorpions, but they're actually ballistas. I mean, scorpions are actually smaller. Anyway, nerdy thing. But that felt a bit flat for me because either they're really, really dangerous, and in which case show us Dany outwitting them, like have her do something really clever. I mean, she does kind of with the Euron thing, but like when she flies down out of the sun, I mean, yeah, that's a great thing. And sure, he probably wouldn't have thought of that because they don't have like planes and things in those days, so he's never going to maybe think of that. But I mean, he should have been looking for her coming out of the sky, because the sky is where a dragon's going to be, and he watches her fly down and he doesn't say anything. Nobody says anything. He doesn't even blow a bugle or something like that, or shout, "There she is," and give the heads up to the rest of his guys. I mean, you think that would happen, but he sees a dragon that flies down, and it seemed a bit weird. And that was another thing. In the whole battle, nobody's using horns or bugles or flags or anything to coordinate. I mean, and people have been doing that forever because that's how in the olden days you used to get people to coordinate. You would, somebody would blow a bugle and somebody would wave a flag with a particular emblem on it, and that would tell the battle, the guys on the other side of the battlefield that that's what's, to bring up the archers or bring up the cavalry or whatever it was. But apparently they don't do that in Game of Thrones because reasons. Anyway, all that stuff kind of irritated me. So yeah, here we are, right on the brink of the finale, the last ever episode of Game of Thrones next week. And there was a teaser for it, and the teaser was literally about 3 or 4 shots. Now, that's fine. They're totally keeping it like, they're playing it close to their chest. They're keeping it all secret, and that's cool. Because, I mean, this final episode, this is going to be like, an hour and a half at least, and it could go absolutely any way. I mean, this might be a 2-hour episode, I'm not sure, but it's going to be its own little movie unto itself. But just speaking about that little, nod ahead, I mean, if you've not watched it, it's literally only 3 shots. But if you've seen this week, then it's not any surprise, because it's just basically armies lined up and stuff. Now, I'm a bit confused, because where did all these Unsullied and Dothraki come from? I mean, didn't most of them die at Winterfell? I mean, I know there was a line last week about how they'd lost half of them, but how? I mean, we never saw that half at Winterfell. We saw literally almost everyone die. We saw all the Dothraki go screaming off into the dark, and we saw a few of them coming running back. But it was so dark you couldn't really tell what was going on. But then suddenly there's like thousands more. I mean, last week, she only had like 50 dudes, and it just seemed a bit strange. I mean, it's not a massive issue with next week's episode, but it seems weird that suddenly that she's got all these people that she didn't have before, and that the show has made it seem like they lost more people than they did. And even though they did have a line, saying, "Oh, we lost, we've still got half our people," that they said last week. But it seems odd. I mean, you could have thrown a line a few weeks ago about leaving a reserve force protecting Dragonstone or something, and then that would be fine. You wouldn't care. You'd be like, "Oh yeah, there's extra dudes down there, and that's fine. They didn't bring those up north." But it's another failing of the Long Night episode for making it look like so many people died. And then for the episode after that, for only showing her turn up with like 50 dudes outside the front of like that. Now, sure, that was probably a personal bodyguard, but it seemed a bit strange. But I'd also like to say, yeah, I was proven right. Dany went nuts, and it's all going to go bad. I mean, I was wrong about Arya. I thought she would die, but I actually still think she's going to die next episode. I think that her killing Dany is too predictable. I reckon she'll probably die horribly, or she'll maybe die helping somebody else kill Dany. Now, it looks like Dany's gone full Hitler basically, and is happy to be the Queen of Ashes and Death and all that, but someone's going to have to stop her. And I feel like this finale will probably be that story, and it'll be like a mini movie in itself, and it could be all over the place. And presumably the end of it is going to have to tie a few things up, and maybe even a sort of a flash forward in the future. But we'll see what happens. It's difficult to say. But my predictions. I reckon that Dany and Jon are going to die. I think Tyrion, Grey Worm. I also think we're probably going to lose Brienne because I think she'll come down. But I expect that Sansa's going to end up on the Iron Throne at the end. Or not the Iron Throne. She'll probably rule from the north, but only after like Dany tries to like end her in some way. So in fact, I think instead of a list of the dead folk, I'm going to do a list of the last people standing, and I'm going to go for Sansa on the Iron Throne with Sir Davos, Sir Bran somewhere in his wheelchair, and anybody else who buggered off up north. I don't think they'll come back. I think Tormund's gone and everything. But I think, Sansa will probably end up marrying Robin of the Vale, and she'll live sort of not happily, but she'll live something ever after until basically the next big bad thing happens. That's my prediction for the end of the show, folks. So until next time, yeah, and that may be a little sooner than you think because I've got my eye on a new limited series that's coming up next week, and I'm going to try and cover it. But until then, I've been Ian, and these have been my grumpy opinions.